Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, pro tournaments are officially back. The fishing world has to say goodbye to a past Bassmaster Classic champion. We hit a ton of topics in today's rapid fire segment. We talk high-end versus budget gear in the fishing pole, and we answer your questions about drop shot hooks, YakAttack products, and more in the mailbag. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by The Rod Locker. Premium gear and expert advice from a staff you can trust. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. As always, we are brought to you by The Rod Locker. Yes, the Rod Locker is officially open for business, both online and in store. And if you live anywhere near Evansville, Indiana, you are in luck because the Rod Locker is having their grand opening event Saturday, January 31st from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. Again, that's in Evansville, Indiana. The address is 500 North Congress Avenue. Go check out the brand new shop. They have over 600 used rods and reels in stock. They're displayed beautifully. They have all kinds of stuff for you to look at on the used side and on the new side. They carry your favorite brands in store. And if that wasn't enough, they're giving away a Megabass P5 Javelin. That is a $500 rod that you have the chance to win just by showing up to their open house and their grand opening. So go check them out. That is again Saturday, January 31st. Mark your calendars, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time in Evansville, Indiana. But for the rest of us, the website is open and ready to go. So you can go to therodlocker.com and browse everything that they have over on the website. New stuff is being added by the day. I've seen pictures of shipments coming in and hitting the warehouse. A very exciting time for the Rod Locker. Brian, Chad, the whole crew over there. We want nothing more than to see them just succeed and blow it out of the water over there at the Rod Locker. They are fantastic folks, and I would rather order my fishing gear from people like Chad and Brian than some random warehouse or website that doesn't care about me. So that is www.therodlocker.com. And as always, you can use code TackleTalkJanuary. That's going to be your code to save 5% off regular priced and sale items over at the Rod Locker. That's going to change every month. So next month it will be Tackle Talk February, then Tackle Talk March. You guys get the drill. Obviously, we're going to follow that pattern throughout the entire year, but 5% off your entire order, used, new, sale items, regular items. It doesn't matter, over at therodlocker.com. And be sure to go check out their grand opening on January 31st. All right, everybody, the next thing we have here, we have some pro fishing. Pro fishing is back in full force. We had stage one of the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour down at Lake Guntersville that just wrapped up last week, our first major fishing tournament of the year. So we already have a super long show today, so I won't go into a ton into this event. If you want to go watch the recaps, they are on YouTube. I would highly encourage it. But your top 10 from stage one at Lake Guntersville for the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour season. 10th place went to Keith Carson. 9th, Chris Lane. 8th place went to Mark Daniels Jr. 7th, Wesley Strader. 6th place, Justin Cooper. 5th place, Banks Shaw. 4th place, Zach Burge. 3rd went to Jacob Wheeler. 2nd place, Jacob Walker. And 1st place, no surprises here, one of the phenoms on the Bass Pro Tour, someone that you have to keep your eye on every single event. It is our buddy, Drew Gill. So huge congratulations to Drew Gill. This is now his 3rd Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour win. He is collecting red trophies like they are infinity stones at this point. He's got to be one of your top 5 anglers on the Bass Pro Tour to watch out for every single week. With electronics, without electronics, cold, warm, north, south, it doesn't matter. Drew Gill should be someone that you're watching every single week. So a giant congratulations to Drew Gill. He gets to cash a $125,000 check and takes home the very first red trophy of the Bass Pro Tour season this year at Lake Guntersville. Okay, everybody, next up here on the show today, unfortunately, we had a passing in the fishing community last week that I feel like we should mention here on the show, as Dion Hibdon passed away at the age of 58. And Dion Hibdon was a 1997 Bassmaster Classic champion. He was the 2000 Forest Wood Cup champion. He had multiple wins. He had an incredible career in his own right. And he was the son of one of the original greats of the sport, another former Classic champion, Hall of Famer Guido Hibdon. And I figured today, rather than go through one of like the 10,000 obituaries that you can find online or the cookie cutter articles that are just going to go through his accomplishments, I figured today I would read you an email that I received from a gentleman that actually introduced me to the history of the Hibdon family years and years ago when he came on this show and gave us a great history lesson in Midwest finesse tactics and shed some light on just how important the Hibdon family was to a lot of the ways that we here in the Midwest fish today. That gentleman is none other than Mr. Ned Cady. So I'm going to read you an email straight from Ned. It says, Dion Hibdon of Versailles, Missouri, died on January 12th. He and his father, the late great Guido Hibdon, played significant roles in the development of Midwest finesse fishing. Moreover, his grandfather, Guido Clinton Hibdon Sr., and uncles were important forefathers to the art and science of Midwest finesse fishing. For instance, back in the late 1950s and early 1960s, they introduced us to the virtues of the split shot rig. In 1977, Dion Hibdon used a soft plastic worm to create the original Guido bug for his school's science project in Versailles, Missouri. After that initial creation, the Hibdons, along with Stella Hibdon and her brother Virgil Connor, handcrafted thousands of Guido bugs. Guido and Dion taught us various ways to rig it and present it to largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, and spotted bass in a variety of waterways, and it became a standard bearer in the repertoire of early Midwest finesse devotees who affixed it to either small skirted jigs or small skirtless jigs. On a skirtless jig, we used it the same way that we would use the beetle and the puddle jumper. It's interesting to note that decades ago, the Hibdons also used sewing needles to sew a thread or two or three or four from rubber jig skirts through the torso of the Guido bug, which is somewhat similar to the dice or fuzzy baits that Japanese finesse anglers recently created and the U.S. lure companies are manufacturing, such as Z-Man Fishing Products, Fuzzy TRD, Fuzzy Bugs, and Fuzzy Nuggets. In the finesse world, the Hibdons were stellar pathfinders. So I thought that was fitting to talk about here on Tackle Talk today, a show that revolves around actual fishing and actual fishing gear more so than the sport and the tournament side of fishing. Ned fills us in on why Dion and Guido were so important to us as anglers today. I mean, that Guido bug that Dion created and they made for so long is a very cool, streamlined, kind of simple craw bait. It reminds me a lot of like a pack-a-craw style body with pinchers that look a lot more like something that would come off of a Yum craw today, or like the appendages that are on the Big Bites craw tube. Just those really long, skinny, rounded pieces that make up each part of the two parts of that claw. And they probably give you a really cool wavy action versus that sort of big, aggressive flap of today's craw baits. So our thoughts and prayers are with the Hibdon family this week as we say goodbye to Dion Hibdon at age 58. Okay, everybody, on today's episode, we have another rapid fire segment here for the Tackle Talk podcast. And we do these episodes every so often, and it's kind of fun because it lets us get a lot more topics out there into the show versus a lot of like the big drawn out deep dives that we like to do here on Tackle Talk. These rapid fire shows really force me to keep my thoughts a little bit more concise and quick and make sure that I'm moving on. So we've got, probably 30 or 40 different topics here today that I've got, a lot of which were submitted by you guys over the past, couple months, whether it be a mailbag segment or a topic that just didn't quite make the show or messages that you guys have sent in. So I've got a lot of things that you guys have actually submitted that you guys think might be kind of fun discussion topics. So we will hit a lot of these really, really quickly here in our rapid fire segment. The first topic I have here just says budget gear. I think moving forward, budget gear is going to be the single most important thing in the fishing industry. I know that's an extremely hot take, but I feel like I can sense the tide turning a little bit. And I would bet, I don't know for sure, but I would bet that we see a little bit of that sentiment mirrored a little bit later in the episode when we get to the fishing poll. There's a little bit of a teaser for you. And I don't know about you guys, but I just have price increase fatigue at this point. I'm so sick and tired of seeing all of my favorite fishing gear climb in price at such a rapid rate that it's pricing me out of the gear that I've used for years. And I'm almost at the point where I just want to say, screw it. And I'm going to focus on budget gear so much more than normal because I know that if I'm feeling it in my wallet, you guys have to too. I mean, I just bought a rod and reel for myself literally like 4 days ago. I needed another spinning combo. I needed a rod. I needed a reel. I needed to build something out for myself. And I ended up choosing, not for the show, not for anything, just for me to fish, a $99 rod and a $99 reel. I put together a budget combo because you kind of have to at this point. You have to be so budget conscious because all of these rods and reels that I used to buy are now like 20 or 30% more than they were 1, 2, 3 years ago. So budget gear is going to be so important as these companies start to price out the regular Joes out of their mid-end gear that those guys have been buying for years. And it's going to be an interesting thing to watch unfold. Now, the weird part is I don't blame the retailers at all, right? It's not the retailer's fault. It's not Tackle Warehouse's fault or Omnia's fault or the Rod Locker's fault or your local tackle shop. It's not them that's raising the prices. It's the brands themselves. And then the brands themselves are raising prices, I'm guessing, because of, increased labor cost, because of tariffs, because of raw materials, all that stuff I don't really want to get into. I know that obviously they're not pulling a lot of these price increases just out of their rear end. But at the same point, I feel like the rate at which they're increasing and the number of price increases that we're getting passed along seems a little ridiculous at this point. So, like I said, the price increase fatigue is real for me. And these companies are going to have to start putting out better quality entry-level gear, or else they're going to risk losing their customers altogether. Because I really think there will be a budget gear war on the horizon in the next couple of years. That's my really hot take. I hope that's the way it goes. And again, I know we'll talk a little bit more about that upcoming in the fishing poll. All right, the next topic here says wake baits. Wake baits might be one of the most underrated bait classes out there, period. I feel like topwater gets all of the love in that kind of area, but wake baits are so incredibly slept on. And a wake bait doesn't even have to be an actual wake bait. It can just be a bait that you are waking. So that's what I like to do with mini buzz baits. That's a topwater bait, right? A buzz bait is the topwater that I just reel so slow that you get it to go down a little bit and you get it to make that waking action. And that's where the magic starts for me. You can say the same thing with glide baits, but it's kind of the opposite speed. If you work a glide bait fast enough, it essentially becomes a wake bait, and that has gotten me some of the biggest bites in my life by doing that. So waking a bait is the best of both worlds, I think, because you get that surface disturbance that you want without causing that fish to have to break the actual surface of the water and exert so much effort to eat it. So yes, very, very slept on wake baits. The next topic here just says 6 cents provoke. Okay, so if you don't know, a 6 cents provoke is their jerkbait line that they have through 6 cents. And I have some. I'm looking at my jerkbait box like maybe 10 feet away from me. There are definitely provokes in there, but I use them really situationally. Like I will use them when I want to fish deeper, submerged trees or ledges or humps or anything like that on a little shorter of a cast. Because usually to throw a jerkbait to get down to that deep, you're going to have to make a bomb cast to give that lip enough time to sort of do its thing, even if you have a really deep diving jerkbait. But with the 6 cents provoke, I actually use that 106 slow sink model, and it performs pretty well in terms of getting down to that desired depth without looking completely stupid on the fall. And then it also looks pretty good when you start it up down there that deep for the first time. And it has decently okay action. Now, it is far from my favorite jerkbait out there. I would say like in the hierarchy of jerkbaits, a 6 cents provoke is probably like, I don't know, maybe scratching top 10 if it's lucky. And even that might be a stretch. It's definitely not my favorite jerkbait just to throw in general, but that slow sink model has come in handy for me a few times. So that's really about the extent that I use 6 cents provokes these days. All right, the next rapid fire topic here says 3D printed lures. I don't know if there's much of a future for 3D printed lures, especially because of the durability issues that you're probably going to have with them and because of the lack of the ability to produce them quickly. 3D printing is a really slow process from what I know versus other sort of mass production processes that companies will use. It also leaves pretty rough edges. It leaves print lines. I just don't think there's a huge future for 3D printed lures. Now, I do think there are some really smart people that use 3D printers for prototyping. I know soft plastic people do that. Glide bait people do that. So that's definitely a proven use for a 3D printer. But I would maybe even go as far to say there's probably more of a future for like metal CNC'd baits than there is for like plastic 3D printed baits. So think of like the Gomexis Cyber Bait, for instance. That is a metal glide bait that is made through a CNC process. So I could see that having a little bit more play than just 3D printed lures in general. But overall, I'm kind of out on 3D printed lures. Our next topic here just says Alex Rudd's beard. I'm jealous, I guess. That's really the only thing I can probably say because it is the polar opposite of me. I don't know if you've ever seen me. I know a lot of you probably never have. You've just heard me through your car or your headphones or your speakers or whatever you listen to this through. But I look like I'm like 17 years old, right? And I am not 17 years old. I am much older than 17 years old, but I know I look that way. So maybe if I had a beard like Rudd, maybe we could change that. But I can promise you there is no future where I am able to grow a beard. That is like so out of the question at this point. The next topic here says waterproof tackle boxes. Overrated. That's what I'm going to call those. I think waterproof tackle boxes are incredibly overrated. They're unnecessary. Unless you are putting your lures away bone dry 100% of the time, then they're almost counterproductive, right? Because waterproof not only means that you're able to keep water out, but it also means that it seals water in. So if you're putting wet lures in there, well, it's sealing the water in there as well, and it can't escape and it can't evaporate. And then you have to do the whole like silica packet or some sort of material in there that's anti-rust. Just give me like a cheap box that latches and lets water in and out. I don't care. I'm not taking my tackle box and like dunking it underwater multiple times a day and holding it down there and submerging it for 10 minutes at a time, right? That's not a big deal to me. And heaven forbid that my tackle box does go overboard or something. And if that's what you're worried about, well, then guess what? When you take it home that night, leave the top open for the rest of the night and all that water will evaporate and you'll be fine and you won't have rust issues. So I don't really understand the infatuation with waterproof boxes. It just never really made a lot of sense to me. You can look in my kayak, you can look in my garage. I would say like 80 to 90% of the tackle boxes that I own are just the cheap $4 and $5 Flambeau boxes. You can get them at Walmart. They're under $5 and they work just fine. Give me 2 latches that latch and keep my baits somewhat organized and I am a happy camper. That's all I need. So yeah, I never really understand the hype on waterproof tackle boxes. Okay, next topic we have here says best bottom contact jig and worm rod. Best is tough because best means there's no price limit. And that basically means that like money doesn't exist. And if you're saying money doesn't exist or money is not an issue at this point, then I would say my 2 favorites are probably the G Loomis NRX Plus or the new GLX. Both of those are insanely sensitive. They're light, they're strong, they're great jig and worm rods if you get the model, obviously, that you're looking for. Now, the problem with that is that money does exist, right? And I don't have unlimited funds, quite the opposite, which means if you want to look at like a step down from there, I would say my favorite kind of mid to high-ish end rods would be the Dobyns Champ Extreme. The 744C is awesome. If you go down from there, like the Shimano X Pride is great as well. The Daiwa Zillion is super nice too, but that's like a $399 rod too. So you got some pretty expensive options up there. If you want to go down, then I would say like Champ XP is a good middle ground, but even that with the price increases is getting up there now. So then on like an extreme budget in like the $100-ish range, I would look at the Fenwick Eagle and I would look at the Daiwa Tatula XT. And I would say that Tat XT at the money is pretty tough to beat right now. All right, next topic we have here says live bait. I think that like fishing with live bait is not even the same activity as fishing with artificial lures. Like they're just completely different things. I'm not saying that one is wrong or that you shouldn't do one or the other, but don't come at me with a 6-pound smallmouth that you caught soaking a mullet under the dam and try and say it's the same thing as somebody catching a 6-pound smallmouth on a jerkbait fishing deep suspended brush in 14 foot of water from the kayak or something. That is a completely different thing. And another hot take here, I guess, I would say, yeah, I'll go with this. I'll stand by this. I think that fishing with live bait and fishing with artificial bait is a greater difference than someone having electronics and someone not having electronics. Electronics is like the hot button issue nowadays, obviously, on like, what an advantage it gives you. I think the advantage you have of using live bait, if you were able to, is much bigger because live bait is real food. At the end of the day, we're trying to trick animals into eating something. It's way easier to get a fish to eat real food than it is to get it to eat a piece of plastic or a piece of wood or a piece of lead, right? You don't have to really trick a fish into eating real food as hard as you have to trick a fish into eating something that is not real food. So that's just my opinion there. I think they're just two totally different activities. The next one here says glides for smallmouth. Well, I have learned a lot about glides for smallmouth over the past probably 2 years because I forced myself to become a better glide bait angler, and I'm glad I did. It's definitely helped me out a lot. I would say nowadays I am like an average or maybe even slightly above average at best glide bait angler. And of the, I don't know, I mean, just guessing here, say I've caught 500 or 600 fish total on a glide bait now over the past 2 years maybe. Those fish have taught me a lot. Like I have learned what gets fish to commit versus what maybe makes them turn away, what draws follows versus bites, what cadences work best in different situations. And I think I might save a lot of that to do a full episode on versus kind of burning it now in the rapid fire. So maybe in the spring, once things start to heat up a little bit, glide baits come a little bit more into play again, I think it'd be fun to do a whole episode on just what I've learned over the past couple of years throwing a big glide bait. All right, next topic we have here just says forward-facing sonar hate. I am so out on this one. Like, I don't even want to talk about this. I don't want to answer this. I don't want to go down this route. I have kept my feelings on forward-facing sonar to a bare minimum on this show over the years. I've only even incorporated it or mentioned it when it's meaningful to us in terms of new gear coming on the market or what it can teach us about how fish act in certain situations. And even then, I've kept it to a pretty bare minimum. I just hate the division it causes. You're not going to change anybody's mind at this point. It is like a tribal warfare type deal at this point on whatever side you're on. And I just wish people would stop talking about it altogether and just go fish, right? I'm so incredibly over people talking about forward-facing sonar. All right, our next topic here says shallow water. Now, this is a topic I can get behind, right? This is the total opposite. I love this. I love shallow water because it forces you to fish in a different way, because it shrinks the water column so much. You don't have 30 feet to play with in that water depth. You have like 2 feet to play with. And that means that a lot of baits are just out of play. It means you're not going to throw big deep diving baits. You're not going to throw super heavy baits. And it also forces the fish to kind of be in the most fun part of the water column, which is near the top, because there is no middle or bottom. If you're in 2 foot of water, there is just like you are right below the surface. So for instance, one of the fun parts about fishing shallow water is that every fish is a topwater candidate. I mean, I have caught fish on topwater with 4 inches of snow on the ground in shallow water, because in shallow water, that topwater popper is only like 6 inches away from that fish's face at any given time, even while it's resting on the bottom. There's just not much room between where that fish is and the top of the water column, and so it doesn't take a lot of effort for that fish to go up and eat it. You're not asking a fish to shoot up, 8 feet to eat a spook in like deeper water. You're asking that fish to just kind of turn its head and slurp a popper that's like 6 inches away from it. So that's one of my favorite things about shallow water fishing, is because it shrinks that water column so much, it brings topwater and wake baits and really shallow running baits into play 12 months out of the year, because they just can't ignore them. They're right there in their face. The next topic here I have says best beaver baits. I'm going to go Berkeley Pit Boss, right? I think that is still my number one to this day. Now, I have a soft spot for the old nostalgic, Havoc versions of that. I know a lot of people probably have great memories of those too. It's kind of funny. I feel like I probably shouldn't have ever said that here on the show, because I kind of collect those old Havoc Pit Bosses at this point, just because they were so special to me. And I feel like they weren't really a big deal too much. And then years and years ago, we started talking about it here on the show about how much I missed those and how much I loved those. And now I think we have created like a secondary market for Havoc Pit Bosses. If you look online, they sell for like way more than they have any right selling. And I can't help but think sometimes that we might have contributed to that. And I probably should have just kept my mouth shut and stockpiled them myself. But yes, I love the Berkeley Pit Boss. It's my favorite shape of any kind of beaver, creature bait out there by far. The 4-inch is my favorite. I don't really use the 3-inch too much. I would rather have a 4-inch and then cut the inch off of the top of it because I like the motion of the 4-inch better than the 3-inch. But that's my number one. I would say number two is the Beast Coast Flippin' Delight. And then I would say number three is probably a Missile Baits D-Bomb. I think that is my top three right there. Pit Boss, Flippin' Delight, D-Bomb. I feel pretty good about that top three. Our next topic says technique-specific rods. I have two words I think that come to mind when I think about technique-specific gear, and it's slippery slope. Because I feel like once you start going down that route, it's really easy to just say, oh man, now I need a dedicated jerkbait setup. I need a dedicated drop shot setup. I need a dedicated chatterbait setup. And now I need a dedicated chatterbait setup for like 1/2 ounce and over. And then I need another setup for everything below 1/2 ounce. And then you wake up one day and you have 50 rods and 50 reels when you only used to have like 7 combos total. I mean, I did that, right? I went down that rabbit hole. I tried to build all of these amazing combos for every little technique. And then I said, wait a second, I can't take more than, 4 or 5 rods with me at any given time in the kayak anyway. So why do I have all of these rods? Because all it does is make me sit in my garage and sit there and second guess myself and third guess myself and fourth guess myself on what combos to take with me that day. I would rather streamline my rod and reel lineup to say, hey, no, I don't have 50 rods and reels. I now have 5 or 6 or 7 that are so versatile that they can wear a bunch of different hats and they can do a bunch of different things, and it gives me more flexibility on the water. So I think a lot of times now I'm looking for versatility in rods more than anything else. All right, next topic we have here just says JDM rods. Are they worth it? No, I don't think they are. I think there are some great rods probably on the Japanese domestic market, but there are plenty of awesome rods that are available in America that don't require you to have some sketchy website mail you an overpriced rod from Japan. I mean, there are plenty of rods that you can buy in America that are made in Japan, that are made in China and Korea and wherever. It doesn't mean that you have to get a JDM rod like off the Japanese domestic market. You don't have to get on Amazon Japan or Digitaka or any of those type of things. There's plenty of great rods available to our market right now, many of which are made in Japan, and that's great. Okay, next topic here is scent. I also think that scent is overrated. I think I've been fairly consistent on that over the years, and I've had guests on this show that swear up and down that I have no idea what I'm talking about and that it's not true and that scent matters so much and you're silly for ignoring it and the, oils on your hands, and it really makes a difference on how far away that fish can find that bait from and how long they hold on and all that kind of stuff. I get it. I'm sure there is probably some merit to it and some importance to it, but in the hierarchy of things I care about, scent is just not at the top of the list. On the top of my list of things that I care about with my baits are the way it looks and the way it moves in the water. I think look and movement are the two most important things with a bait. I think smell and taste definitely fall down on that list a little bit more, but that's just me. Okay, next topic says ultralight. In terms of like ultralight gear and ultralight rods, they're incredibly fun. If you haven't taken out your ultralight combo in a while, you should probably do it. I did this like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was on the river one day. I found a giant school of crappie, so I marked them, and then I came back like a week later and I went and tried to find them, and I brought my ultralight rod with me because I was like, man, if I can find those crappies, I bet I could have so much fun just wearing crappies out on like a really skinny ultralight rod. And I found them again. They weren't quite where they were before, but they were close enough. After about 30 minutes or so, I was able to find them again. And I had a blast just wearing out like 10 to 12 inch crappie on this little noodle of a rod that I hadn't broke out in years. It makes you feel like a kid again. It's awesome. I highly recommend it. If you don't have an ultralight rod, go get one, take it out with you every once in a while. And if you do, break it out, knock the dust off of that old ultralight rod and go have fun. Even if it's just spending, like I did, 30 minutes out of your 8-hour day out on the water using it and having a little bit of fun and feeling like a kid again. Okay, oh my goodness, we still have so many of these to go. I really need to like start chugging through these super fast. I need quicker answers, more concise. Come on, Andrew, you can do this. All right, let's go. This is actual rapid fire coming up because I still have a ton here. Our next one says best lure for winter, jerkbait. Next one here, winter chatterbait tactics. I would say leave it at home. right? I don't really use a chatterbait too much in the wintertime. If you are going to break it out, get a heavier version like half ounce or up and slow roll it a little bit closer to the bottom. That works sometimes, but I don't really use chatterbaits a whole lot in the wintertime around here. Is Z-Man overrated? For chatterbaits, no. For Elastec, no. But for everything else, yes. Banks versus boat versus kayak. I'm going to go kayak all day, like no question. Obviously, you guys know me. That's just how I like to fish. Wet wading is probably my second. And then I guess that maybe counts as bank fishing because you're on your feet. And then I guess I would put boat third. Next, we have non-shad-based patterns. If you want a sneaky one here, use crawfish patterns late at night near rocky banks. You're welcome. Go look into that one if you want. I have a lot of videos that we have taken as we've like loaded in or loaded out at night and you're like near the boat ramp or you're near the shore and you're taking out and you shine like a bright light in the water around any sort of rocky bank and you just see like what looks like the bottom moving. It's like hundreds or thousands of crawfish moving around at night. I don't know a ton about their biology, but I got to imagine that they just like get super active at night based on what I've seen with a flashlight. I'll never forget the first time that we saw it. My buddy Ryan, if he's listening to this, will remember it too. We shined a really bright light and it was just like, we were blown away. Like, look at all the crawdads. And now I don't get to go out fishing as much as I would like to at night. But if you are around Chunk Rock or anywhere up shallow that has a good crawfish population, target them at night because they are definitely out, and it was like buffet city that we saw the couple times that we shined a light down there. All right, next one says balsa crankbaits. Balsa crankbaits are very cool. I think it's like a work of art more so than a lure, but it's a work of art that you can use, and that's my type of art, right? Usable art that has utility. I really like that, and there's some awesome, talented balsa crankbait makers out there. Next one says, do we like rock bass? No. Next one says, smallmouth in creeks versus rivers. Oh man, that's tough. That's like picking your favorite kid, right? Do you want in creeks or rivers for smallmouth? I would say like one is my childhood. Creeks is how I grew up fishing. And then one is more so what I do now, I think. So I would say rivers probably by a little bit, just because rivers you have a chance at a bigger fish. But there is nothing more fun than going out and just smacking fish in a really tiny like farm creek or something back where all these smallmouth don't really get targeted too much. If you want fun, I would say creeks. If you want better fish, I'd say rivers. Next one here says point of diminishing returns in gear and tackle. Brother, we're already there, man. Have you looked around the past like 5+ years? I think it's safe to say we have definitely hit that in a lot of ways, and I probably don't see that stopping anytime soon. Next one says, big bass on the fly. Well, I wouldn't know. I've never caught a fish on a fly rod. I don't fly fish. I drive a truck and I pee standing up, so I've never really I tried to do it straight face. I thought maybe I'd be able to get through it. But no, I'm just kidding, right? Fly fishing looks really cool. I know that I should go out and I should try fly fishing. I know that I would probably like it. I've just never done it. I always have this kind of fear that like I'm going to get hung up in the trees the whole time. I don't know how to cast it. I don't want to waste that much time learning. I would rather just go out and fish how I like to fish. So no, I've never caught a bass on a fly rod. I guess you could probably put that on the bucket list. Maybe I think that would be fun. It also would be fun just to go out and do some fishing with a fly rod, like out west or somewhere where like it's big trout country or something. I think that would at least be fun. Next one says going cheap versus expensive and when. So I guess, I don't know, when I'm buying gear, I tend to buy more expensive rods and less expensive reels. I would rather do that than vice versa. I usually go cheap soft plastics and expensive hard baits because hard baits last longer, so I can justify the investment in a hard bait. And then I usually go pretty cheap on mono. I'm a Stren guy. I would go middle of the road for braid, and then I would buy expensive fluoro. Next one says AI pictures in fishing. It's annoying, I guess. Like AI is just annoying in general. I think it's just a substitute for laziness. For me, that's how I see it a lot of times. So you see people kind of like outsourcing, social content or things like that to more AI. And you can tell when something's AI and when it's not AI. I would rather spend more time, put together something that like I'm proud of and I actually made than just try and pump out a bunch of AI memes or pictures or whatever it is just for the sake of volume. Now, I do think we are going to run into some issues at some point with like kayak fishing and AI. We've already seen some cheating scandals here pretty recently. That's just going to keep getting worse if you can use AI. People will find a way around that where you will get doctored pictures and all kinds of issues because kayak fishing tournaments especially are still a little bit on like the honor system because nobody's watching these people. So I think that's something that everybody needs to keep their eye out for in the future. All right, next one here says burnout in fishing. Yeah, burnout definitely happens. I think you have to switch it up a lot. You got to fish new water. You got to target new species. And a big one, you have to use new baits. I think bait burnout is a lot of people's problem because I just can't go out for the rest of my life and fish over and over again with the same Ned rig and catch fish. I need variety. And I'm sure burnout happens in other areas too, like on the content side, if you're a social media person or whatever, I'm sure you get a little bit burnout, but that's why I've always stayed completely away from on the water video because I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to do the YouTube thing where I'm now videoing all of my time on the water and I'm worried about camera angles and audio and doing an intro and an outro and putting a story together and did I get the right angle and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to have to worry about that, right? I will take pictures every once in a while if a fish is noteworthy enough to take a picture of, or if I have an idea for just like a cool picture, then I'll do that. I like to document things for sure, but it's for me. I like to document things because of the memories that it brings me. And some of the people that do video stuff, I guess you can probably say they do it for that reason too. And I get that, but I just don't want to worry about that many things out on the water. I want to worry about fishing and only fishing, catching fish. That's it. And what happens out there on the water is between me and nature, not between me and a bunch of people on the internet. All right, next one says, are boats overpriced? Yes, by a lot. Absolutely. Next one says live online lure sales. Live, I guess, would be like Whatnot is probably what you're talking about. Something like that. That's popping up all over the place now. Whatnot's basically like Home Shopping Network or what was the other one back in the day? QVC, I think. Like those type of things where you are just being talked into buying something by a salesperson. It's like the 3 a.m. infomercial that you wake up and you're watching, and the next thing you know, like a slap chop is being delivered to your door because you watched a 25-minute infomercial on why you need 2 slap chops for $19.95. That's what Whatnot is. You are watching like a salesperson sell you baits. It's fast-paced in nature. There's time constraints on it, so it puts that kind of like fight or flight mode on everybody, and they feel like they got to buy something before they miss out. When you put a time limit like that on things, people's rational decision-making goes out the window, and that's what they're banking on, obviously. The seller is hyping everything up. They're trying to drive up the sales, and that peer pressure just gets you. So I think it really leads to a lot of people just severely overpaying for things on formats like that. So not a huge fan of that. Resale market is our next topic here, and I think that just kind of loops right in with the topic before, right? I think the resale market is shady. I don't like the idea of people scalping baits and buying baits on a drop and then immediately reselling them or whatever it is. Like, it just seems silly. People buying a whole bunch of Sakamata shads so they can mark them up, $5 and resell them just seems shady and weird to me. And then our last topic here just says local unsung heroes. I guess around here, like the one that comes to mind, obviously, is my buddy Ryan. Ryan has to be at the top of my list for local unsung heroes. And I know that he might not be unsung because a lot of you probably know him by now. You've probably seen him on social media. He catches a ton of giant smallmouth, so there's a chance he's probably come across your feed at some point. But the dude is the most diehard angler that I've ever met in my entire life, times 10. And I mean that. Like, if Ryan is awake, he is on the water fishing. There is no other option for him. He is either at work, he's sleeping, or he's fishing. That's it. And that's really what it takes to be great at something. And Ryan really puts in the time to be great at fishing around here. That's why he catches more big fish than you or I do, because he spends more time on the water. I've said it before, there is a direct correlation between time on the water and success on the water. And Ryan is living, breathing proof of that. So yeah, I think my local hero here in terms of like a hammer that doesn't get the recognition that he probably deserves is Ryan Dahl. All right, that is our rapid fire segment for this week. Next up, we're going to get into the fishing poll here in just a second. But first, The Tackle Talk podcast is brought to you in part by Humminbird. No matter what you're looking for, whether it's basic 2D, if you're looking for down imaging, side imaging, live sonar, 360, you could need a small unit for a kayak or large units for your boat. You could need an ice fishing bundle, whatever it is, Humminbird has you covered. With first-class features and technologies like target lock and the Mega line of products, so that's Mega Live 2, that's Mega Down and Mega Side Imaging, Mega 360, Dual Spectrum Chirp Sonar, Humminbird really is a one-stop shop for all of your marine electronics, your graphs, and your fish finders. Whether you're looking for big or small, whether you just want simple features or cutting-edge technology, see for yourself why Humminbird is simply, clearly better. To learn more, you can go to www.humminbird.com. The Tackle Talk podcast is also brought to you by Minn Kota. You guys know Minn Kota has a full line of legendary trolling motors, like one of the biggest names in the game in terms of trolling motors with Ultrex, the Altera, they've got the Tarova, they've got their newest option, that Kayak Tarova, if you're looking for a bow mount kayak trolling motor. And Minn Kota trolling motors are so much more than just, point the arrow that way, hit the button with your foot and go. They have great technology and features like their one boat network, spot lock, advanced GPS, sonar integration, and more. So wherever you need to go or stay, I guess, in the case of spot lock, Minn Kota can get you there. For more information about the full line of Minn Kota trolling motors and shallow water anchors, you can visit www.minnkotamotors.com. All right, let's jump into this week's fishing poll presented by Humminbird.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Fishing Poll. Brought to you by Humminbird. Explore more at humminbird.com.
All right, everybody. On today's fishing poll segment, I have a very simple, very specific question for you all. And that is, have you ever spent more than $300 on a fishing rod? And that is not a fishing combo. That's not rod and reel. That's just the rod. Have you ever crossed the $300 Rubicon for a rod? And I chose $300 because I think that's really my tipping point in terms of what I consider really high-end gear. Because if a rod is over $300, that is a high-end rod. I don't care what you say. I don't care what anybody says. $300 is a lot to fork over for a rod. And more, there are these rods that used to be below that number that were considered kind of, upper to mid-tier rods. You're talking like Shimano X Pride that is now well over $300. You've got your beloved Dobyns Champ XP, the blue one, not even the orange, the extreme, just the regular blue Champ XP has now crept into that $290 range. So it's almost crossing that line. And then you've got things like the Daiwa Tatula Elite, which is over $300. You've got the Zillion, which is way past $300. But then if you look at something like some brands maybe that we don't talk about so much, talk about like Kistler. Kistler Heliums are $300. Kistler Z-Bones are $400. I mean, I've had my eye on an Alpha Angler rod. That's another brand that I've kind of been snooping around on. And their rods are anywhere from $275 to $325. And then you look at like the St. Croix Legends, those are $325 and up. I mean, a lot of really popular rods are over $300 nowadays. But I'm just genuinely curious how the Tackle Talk audience feels about $300 rods. And the way that you make your feelings known in the fishing world is with your wallet. So have you ever forked over the money for a $300 rod? And to be honest, your answer to this question today probably doesn't just affect this discussion, but it probably affects the future of Tackle Talk as well, because it's really going to show us where our listeners stand in terms of their budget and the type of gear that they think is important. Because guess what? If only 4% of you come back and say, hey, I've bought a $300 rod before, well, that means 96% of you have not. And we're going to focus a whole lot more on the gear that is below $300 for the most part anyway. You have to balance stuff out, but we would make sure to hit a lot more on the budget stuff moving forward. But then on the flip side, if 75% of you say, no, I have bought a $300 rod before, well, then that means we need to cover a little bit of the high-end stuff just as much as we do the budget gear because you guys are buying both. So it's kind of a quick status check on our listeners here and where you guys stand. And notice I did not ask if you frequently buy expensive gear, because I feel like that's probably a pretty lopsided question. I feel like most of us definitely don't normally buy that expensive of gear. I mean, that's a very expensive rod. I can't afford stuff like that all the time. I'm sure you guys can't either. But the question is, have you ever bought a $300 rod before? In my case, yes, I have, but it's only been a couple times. I have bought, maybe 3, if I think, really fast in my life, over $300. Now, I do have rods that now would cost over $300, but I didn't buy them for $300. I would have either bought them before price increases, or I may have bought them used. But the only rods I can think that were above that were probably my Megabass P5 Destroyer, the Tequila Baccarat. That was way over $300. My NRX 872S was way over $300 for sure. You could count my GLX that I had for a minute, but I only got to use it twice before it snapped and broke in a kayak crash. So that was kind of a sad one, but not really going to count that one too much. And then my Daiwa Zillion. I think those are the only rods I have that were over $300. But let's see what you guys said. Have you ever bought a $300 rod? I have no idea how this is going to go, but I am pulling up our results here, and okay, only 19% of you said that you have ever bought a single rod over $300 ever. And those are all bona fide Tackle Talk listeners, and those are not social media randos, because we ran this poll exclusively through the Tackle Talk website after we asked you last week to go over and vote on it. So that really would have been the only way that someone would have even known to go over and vote on this week's poll. I like that because it makes it so that only people who actually listen to the show are included in this vote, and it's not just random people on social media every once in a while that sneak in there. So I think we might do that moving forward. I think we will put a big emphasis on doing the fishing poll through the website mostly. We might still do some social stuff every once in a while, but most of the results will be from the Tackle Talk website. But 19% of you said that you had bought a $300 rod, which means that 81% of you had not. 81% have never bought a $300 rod or more, and that's definitely saying something. Now, here is a PSA to the fishing companies out there, and I know that some of you are listening. I can name at least 10 big brands right now that I know that have people that listen to this episode every week. You guys, use that data. 81% of the diehard fans of a no-nonsense fishing show, like your dream demographic as a fishing company, do not use high-end gear. At least they don't use $300 rods or up. 81%. And I would bet those same anglers are pretty frugal with their reel purchases and their line and their baits too. So I would strongly recommend, if you are a fishing company listening to this, turning your attention back to the budget angler, because many of us just feel like we've been neglected lately. The reels are always $200 or more. The rods are creeping up into $300 or more. We want like $80 rods. We want $99 reels. We understand that they're not going to be Metaniums or NRXs, and that's okay with us. We just want good gear at an affordable price. And I said this in one of our social media posts last week, but I'll say it here again. I smell a budget war coming on pretty soon. I think people are fed up. I think the cost of all of our gear keeps going up. I mean, we've had, 1 to 2 price increases for most of the rod and reel brands over the past probably 8 months alone, and we're tired of it, right? They're pricing us out of our favorite gear, which means we're going to start looking elsewhere. There are going to be a lot of like quote unquote free agent anglers pretty soon that I guarantee will abandon brand loyalty for affordability down the road. So I think the brands that really turn their attention back to the budget anglers will be handsomely rewarded for it. I mean, look at our poll, right? Do you want to cater to 19% or 81%? There is a giant market of people in that 81% that are largely being ignored, or at least they feel like they're being ignored because there's not a lot of great new budget gear coming out. And we saw a slight glimmer of hope last year at ICAST that I was kind of happy with. Daiwa and Luz both came out with brand new budget reels, which was nice to see. And my hope is that that trend will continue, because it should continue if rod and reel companies are smart and they want to keep a lot of these customers from going elsewhere. So that's our fishing poll this week. Thank you to everybody that participated. Again, you can head over to www.tackletalkpodcast.com/fishing poll. That's POLL, like survey, fishing poll right now. And you can vote on next week's poll. All right, everybody. And finally, we're going to jump into the mailbag here in just a second. But first, the Tackle Talk podcast is brought to you in part by Amped Outdoors. Amped Outdoors is an industry leader in lithium batteries that are engineered and built for all kinds of marine applications. We're talking trolling motor batteries, batteries for your graphs, for live sonar, for ice fishing, for kayak motors, you name it, Amped has a battery to fit your needs. With Amped, you get the highest quality components, you get waterproof case designs, you get Bluetooth connectivity in their larger batteries, which is nice so that you know when it's charging, you know when it's fully charged, you can monitor your battery status out there on the water and you know how much you have left. That's the best part about this kayak battery that I've got that I'm using now from Amped. I can pull up my phone, pull up the app, and I can see, ooh, I've got 78% of my battery left. I never used to know before. I used to be guessing and hoping that I wouldn't run out. Now I get the peace of mind of knowing, wow, I've got way more battery than I thought I did. I'm totally fine, no need to worry, and having that peace of mind is priceless. You also get heated charging with all of their 50 amp hour and up batteries, which means you can charge them in any weather conditions. You don't have to worry about keeping them inside or charging them in a warm place because you're not supposed to charge batteries like below freezing. You don't have to worry about that with Amped because those bigger batteries come with heated charging included. You get all of that plus a 10-year no gimmick warranty and world-class customer support based out of Hudson, Wisconsin. So you can head over to www.ampedoutdoors.com. You can check out their full line of batteries and power your passion with Amped.
This is the Tackle Talk podcast mailbag, powered by Amped Outdoors, your source for premium, affordable lithium batteries.
All right, let's get into the mailbag here. Our first question comes to us today from Mark, who says, hello, Andrew. You've been a huge influence on my wade fishing for smallmouth in rivers and creeks, but not all my creeks have smallmouth. During a previous show, you seemed to suggest that a good creek would be at least waist deep in places. If I'm looking at tributaries of a known smallmouth river, is that a good criteria to use? What else might you look for on maps or when you're exploring? Is there a way to determine if it's likely to be a creek where there might be resident fish versus one only for spawning? Good questions, Mark. Yeah, I don't know where you're at, so I don't know the bodies of water you're talking about. But yes, a great place to start is, do you have a well-known smallmouth fishery and are there tributaries off of it? Chances are there's smallmouth in those tributaries, unless there's like some sort of weird biological change in the water as you get farther up. So like a good example would be here, we have like 4 or 5 rivers that kind of converge on each other around here in the Dayton area. And there's one river where once you get to a certain point up north, it's nothing but trout. There are no smallmouth really, like I would say like 1% or under above a certain city on this river. And I think it has to do with water temperature, it has to do with average depth, and it has to do with the fact that the state stocks brown trout up there and, you know, they've kind of overtaken that area and that's kind of their domain, I guess. There's probably something to that too. The smallmouth would rather just stay farther south where those trout can't live and they can't survive as well because the water's a little warmer and then they don't have to compete for food. That would be my guess, but I have no clue. But for the most part, yeah, if it's a tributary off of a great smallmouth fishery, there's probably smallmouth in it. If the water gets deep enough where those fish can run up and down that trib, then yeah, they're probably all throughout it. Now, they might not be all throughout it all year long. I mean, I can think of a couple creeks around here, for instance, where there are fish in them probably, I don't know, 9 months out of the year for the most part. But if you go wade those creeks in like July and August, those smallmouth are not there. They have moved. They have gone either up or downstream because they know if they stay in that stretch, it's going to dry up and they're going to die. So they know once the water hits like a certain level that they need to start moving and get out of there or else they're going to get trapped. So it doesn't mean that they're there all year long, but there could still be resident fish. It doesn't mean that, you know, just because they're not there 12 months out of the year, it's not just a spawning area. Now, those areas are good for spawning, so I would definitely target them during the spawn, but chances are there's some resident fish around there somewhere. So if I'm thinking about what I look for in a creek or a river, One of the things I really like to look for is like those big S waivers in the river. Like I don't want a real straight ahead, narrow, almost canal looking river. I want a river or a creek that has a ton of bends in it, because those bends help fish set up in certain ways. It's not just a straightaway of nothing and maybe some tree cover or something and that's it. No, I want like to have some curves and some flow and some different like push points and all that kind of stuff. The other thing you can look for that I mentioned a second ago is tree cover. Tree cover is a great opportunity to try and find a great healthy habitat, because what happens is obviously, trees have bugs and trees drop leaves and all that kind of stuff. And all that stuff helps that ecosystem. There's some good food chain stuff that happens if you've got a lot of trees around. And then if I'm exploring on Google Maps, the one thing that I always use is street mode. Like take your little dude and drop him around and look around, put him on bridges and look out from that bridge. And sometimes you can even go different times a year, or you can go back, 5-10 years at a time, see how that water level changes. But I like to just kind of snoop around bridges in street mode. I like to snoop around bike paths and stuff like that, because it really helps me get eyes on the river without having to actually go out and look at it myself. Next question here is from Matt, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, thanks for all your hard work that you put in every week to put out a great show. Your recent poll question made me wonder how many people fish a drop shot with a Texas rig versus a nose hook or some variation like I do most of the time. I fish in Arizona in lakes that don't have a lot of grass, so I mostly just nose hook unless I'm around a lot of brush. I'm just curious what goes on across the rest of the country. Thanks for the great stellar weekly content, Matt." Well, Matt, I think you're probably spot on. I don't know too much about what goes on outside of where I fish, but yeah, I would say, 95% of people are probably nose hooking a drop shot. I feel like a drop shot is almost always a nosed hook bait of some sort, whether that is, a minnow bait or a worm or something like that. But I don't know. I mean, there are people that probably do power shot with like a EWG, or I guess a Tokyo rig is kind of a play on a drop shot with an EWG hook on it. But I think most of the time people are doing what you're doing. I think a lot of people are just nose hooking a bait. If they are around a lot of brush or a lot of cover, then I would argue they're probably not putting an EWG on it. They're probably just not picking up a drop shot in general. They're probably going with something else. All right, the next question here is from Sean, who says, "Hey, Andrew, I wanted to thank you for your podcast. I mostly enjoy the fact that I can listen to your podcast around my kids without having to worry about what language will be used. So I have a question for you. Have you ever thought about doing a weekly or monthly kids question or kids tip? I know my boys would find it awesome. I wish you the best of luck, and let's grow this sport for the next generation, Sean." Well, first off, what's up, Sean? What's up to your kids? If your boys are listening, how's it going? That's a good idea. I think my problem with doing something like specifically for kids would be that I would be afraid that I would insult them by how simple that tip might be, because the crazy part is a lot of kids nowadays are so educated on everything. They have the internet at their fingertips. They are like light years ahead of where I was when I was their age. And so if I tried to do like, here's a kids segment, and then I do a kids segment, and it's like so introductory, and these kids, they're listening to it and they're like, yeah, duh, I already know all that. So that's always kind of the hard part for me, is trying to balance that for a younger audience. I just try and do tackle talk in general so that a younger audience can appreciate it, an older audience can appreciate it, and it doesn't really talk too much over people's heads. So even if you are younger and you're just getting started, that it's still beneficial for you. But yeah, that might be fun. It might just be fun to get an episode in general going on, or maybe we get a guest or someone to come in about how you can effectively teach younger anglers to fish, because it's just like anything else, with parenting or being a school teacher or something. I'm sure there are best practices to, how to teach a kid to cast. What are the right resources they should be looking at? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, great suggestion. And then our last question here is from Wilfred, who says, "Hey, Andrew, what's your take on YakAttack? I'm looking forward to getting a few things for my kayak, but I'm not sure if it's worth the money." Thoughts on YakAttack itself? I will say there are some things that YakAttack makes that are worth the money and some that aren't. Now, I say this as someone, I do have YakAttack stuff on my kayak. I use it quite a bit, but I only use certain things from YakAttack because other things are just way overpriced, and I don't think you need to buy them from someone so specialized. you can get something a little bit more generic. But the things that are worth it to me are anything that I'm going to be taking off and on my kayak a lot. I really like their lock and load system. I like that better than using like a ram mount or a ball mount or something like that. It's just a lot quicker to take on and off with that lock and load. Now, the only problem with the lock and load is it's not quite as sturdy, because I have a lot of pieces on my kayak where when I first bought them and you clip that lock and load in place, it stayed great. And now over the years, it's almost like something in there loosened. And I have 3 or 4 different things on my kayak where you can kind of pick that up even when it's locked in, and you can rotate it and it can kind of swivel a little bit, and it's not super secure anymore. So I don't know if that just happens over time or it's a quality control thing. I have no idea. I don't know what it is. But at the same time, I do have things that I use from YakAttack. My throttle mount is made out of YakAttack pieces. My mount that I made for my actual graph in front of me, I used YakAttack lock and load pieces. So I do use some stuff, but then at the same point, like there are things that YakAttack sells that I would never pay what they're asking for. So like their, I don't know, their cart system or their flags or storage things or things like that. The one thing that was a bit of an exception, I did get a YakAttack black pack used off of somebody. That's been actually really nice. I do enjoy my black pack. I never thought I would be the guy to say like, whatever it is, $100 crate that you have in the back, you don't need that. I can get a milk crate for $5. That YakAttack black pack is pretty nice. But at the same point, I'm not going to buy like track mount systems through them. I think their cart is severely overpriced. There's some other things there that they've kind of dipped their toe in the past year that they've started selling that I'm not super sold on. But at the same point, like I said, I do have YakAttack products on my kayak, and there are certain things that are worth it. So Wilfred, I guess if you want to shoot me a DM on what you were looking at putting on there, I can probably point you in the right direction on whether or not that's something that's worth the money through YakAttack or not. All right, everybody, that is today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Tackle Talk. I appreciate you all. As always, you can go over to the Tackle Talk website, tackletalkpodcast.com. There, you can submit your own mailbag question to be heard on an upcoming episode. You can also vote in next week's fishing poll. I want to make sure that your voice is heard next week. It was a lot of fun seeing a ton of results come through the website, and I know that those are you, the actual listeners, so it makes that segment a lot more fun. Also, a quick reminder, the National Fishing Expo's Columbus show is coming up on January 30th through February 1st. You can get tickets at the link in today's show description, and you can use code TACKLETALK26. That's going to save you a couple bucks on your entry fees to get in, and you're not going to have to wait in the box office line on your way in. That is worth the price in and of itself, but you can save a couple bucks by using code TACKLETALK26. Go find us on Instagram, Facebook. You guys know the drill, and we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.